Hey, Matt,
Ty, how are you?
did you know that this week is Nurses Week?
I did not know.
Well, I did because somebody, a little bird reminded me. So I bought lunch today at our surgery center
What a guy.
and we got lunch from Jersey Mike's. Have you ever eaten there?
I, maybe?
Their subs are amazing.
Okay.
But here's the deal. At surgery centers, hospitals, the office, there is always so much food because people will, if they have a party over the weekend, they'll bring in food.
Yep.
People will drop stuff off. Reps will bring donuts or whatever. There's always food around. So I made a policy 15, 20 years ago, never eat at work except for like around the holidays,
Yeah.
right? And this is what I noticed because today, since I bought the Jersey Mike's, I didn't actually buy it. My daughter who works with me bought it and said, "Dad, you need to buy lunch for Nurses Week." And I
I
said,
figured as
"Sure,
much.
take care of it." Anyway, you you eat something like that and it's so good, but then you are hungry the rest of the day.
Why is that?
I literally think it just primes the stomach. It probably is the extra carbs of the sub roll. If you're eating mostly like meats and vegetables and maybe some fruit, you don't tend to overeat that kind of stuff.
Right.
But, like, I had full sub and I was like, "Well, I could have another sub and just work out harder today." But it makes you realize that sometimes you do have to set rules for yourself. I know you're not a big eater, but that used to be my problem. We used to eat really healthy at home, but at work, I was like, I can eat whatever I want." And, you can't as you get older,
But
unless you're Dr. Klepper.
well, if you only eat Chick-fil-A, I mean,
Yeah.
that's his body rejects everything else. Um, but back to that, I do notice that though, when I don't eat sandwiches often, but when I do, I get really hungry later in the day. And
Mhm.
maybe that is because they're the carbs.
Yeah, I think it's the carbs. And the other thing is I usually don't eat till noon, but
Right?
because I knew the subs were coming, I was starving by probably 10 o'clock. And I was
You're
like, "This is so
excited.
bizarre," like, just because I wanted my sub. And okay, full honesty, I had one of the chocolate chip cookies, and we're not talking one of the little ones, we're talking the big ones.
Did Mary Kate make them?
No, no, these were from Jersey Mike's also.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'm
Yeah,
sorry. I thought,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So Jersey Mike's is not a sponsor. Once again, we are coming in strong,
Yeah.
supporting things
Yeah.
that we think are good. So
And
I don't think
and
you
I
should
think
eat it
that's
every
good.
day. Every once in a while, it's good to test yourself.
Yeah, but I also think it's good that, we're letting sponsors know we don't answer to the man, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Right, we go
Yeah.
out there, and we'll tell it like it is. You can sponsor us all you want, that's great, but if we like Jersey Mike's more than Subway, we're gonna let you know.
Yeah. Now, we do have another problem is as we've been doing these podcasts, we talk a lot. I talk a lot. You talk some, and
A
you
little
do
bit.
your best to keep me straight, but every once in a while we mess up and we need to fact
Yep,
check.
yep,
I think we mentioned that Hermes like invented the hug
we did.
and Franco the Persian Panther wanted what do you call it? Credit. He says he taught Hermes to hug. He said Hermes was as awkward as me until he met Franco.
Well, first off, I love that all of our fans, I know you like to call them the homies, is what you like to call them. There's battles, there's beef. There is like a lot of beef in social media, what's going on. I don't try to get into that, but I've got a hug from Franco. I'm an Irmis hugger. I think he's a little gentler, he's softer, he's kinder. I
Oh, I think the only solution for this is the two of them to hug it
hug
out.
off? Hug off?
A hug off. A hug off. Yeah.
I like it. And you know what? I think we bring in another loyal listener. I think we bring in Peter Smith. And if either one of them could break him and make him,
Yes.
get into it and enjoy the hug, then that's the winner. That's the goal. If they can
It's like
melt that iceberg,
like, teaching Peter Smith to hug is like
yep,
taming a wild stallion. Like, it could be
100%.
dangerous.
It could be. It could be. Someone could lose,
He
he
could
could
take you
get
down
fucked
with a
in the
double
eye.
A tank down.
Yeah.
So
But
the
I mean, those guys are, both great huggers. And you know what? If they can do it, if they can break Peter Smith, they'd be the champion of the world.
okay.
Goats.
Uh, the other thing is we mentioned many times in last week's episode, my mom was not 6 feet tall. I think she was 5'7" at best. I'm thinking she's probably 5'6" now. I
Right.
texted her before this and be like, "How tall are you? You're tallest," but I don't think she's 5'8". I think she was 5'7". So I don't know what that says about you that you thought she was 6 foot.
Well, I've always looked up to your mother.
Yes. Okay. All right. So
And
tonight we're
and my mom was very, very excited that she got a lot of play
uh
on that, and she was very proud of herself. She said, yeah, she was like, she's having a little problem. So I was like, "That was one of my better ones. That was one of my better ones."
yes, the practical joke on me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the great thing is my dad didn't know. She's like, "What are you talking about?" She's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, never I told you. I tell you that I
Yeah.
mess with Ty and Eric."
Oh, the
So,
other thing we got in from a long time listener and former guest, Katie Smith, Dr. Smith, Katie Yang wanted to point out that her older brother Eric was also amazing at gymnastics and sent me a picture of him on the parallel bar with the OP shorts and the tube socks. And I'm like, I'm sure Junebug was not on the parallel bars. So another one to add to
another
my
notch for
argument.
Eric over Junebug. All right. Well, you know what? If we can find Junebug, I'm sure he's doing well these days. Let's, maybe we get him on here to, plead his case.
Well, I think it's pretty amazing though. Since the last time we did corrections, I think those are the only corrections we need to make.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good work.
We're real pros.
We are real pros. We are.
Okay. So now tonight we are interviewing Pat Crain.
Yeah, Pat Crain, educator, athlete,
Everything.
everything, all around good
He's
guy.
going to tell us what he does.
I can't wait.
Because if we start doing it now, we could get it wrong, and then we have to fact
And
check
then
that.
it's just a vicious circle.
Hey, everybody. So, welcome to House Calls, the podcast. Tonight we have Pat Crain. And this is a little bit surprise for Matt, but Matt, this is an intervention. So,
Uh-oh.
I know you've been helping with my golf game, but
Yep.
Pat literally gave me one tip. He said one thing, and I put the ball like 3 inches off the green. And I'm like, it might be time to let you go and hire Pat as my golf coach.
I turn that over with pleasure. Um, I would like to turn that over, and I'm also teaching my father how to drive a Tesla. So if you want to take that on as well, Pat, that'd be great. If you take Ty and my father, I would be very helpful. I'd forever in your debt.
Well, it's interesting that we have two golf stories with two of the people that I've probably had the wildest experiences on the Sherwood golf course. So Ty gave you a really good tip, and you were able to drive the ball right down the middle. I also almost killed Matt with a drive
Oh
last
my God.
year.
That's
He
right.
didn't realize it was me. He came storming all the way up to the tee to scream at this crazy guy who almost hit him with the ball and then realized Christy and I were playing golf,
Yep.
and he
Yep.
smiled, relented. So um, Sherwood golf's not for the faint of heart.
No, no, and I'm pretty sure I don't know if I could have kicked Chrissy's ass the way I was going to. I don't know if that was going to happen, but I know she works out more in the summers.
Well, Pat, the way we start this is we want to know what you're doing now because we do want to get into your career. And I think the best way to get into that is explain what you do now and then figure out how you got there.
Yeah, so my current title is Assistant Superintendent of a department in Anne Arundel County Public Schools called Educational Options and School Climate. So essentially, what I do is I oversee a network of schools within the county that is really anything different and non-traditional than the hundreds of other county schools. So charter schools, contract schools, alternative schools, evening high school, summer school, home and hospital teaching. And then I have all of the departments that oversee school climate for the district as well. And this is my 15th year in Anne Arundel County. I've been in education for close to, well, over 30 years now, 31 years. I've done everything from being a high school counselor and high school football coach. I've worked in the private sector. I worked for technology, educational startup companies. I worked for private companies and opened and operated charter schools across the state of Maryland. I built schools, developed schools, worked for the State Department of Education to run their charter office. So I've been in education for pretty much my whole career, really focusing on this network of schools that I now oversee and operate in Anne Arundel County for the last 15.
Right. Pat, tell me the difference between a charter school and a public school. Well, you're probably gonna do a better job than I can, but the charter school kind of you have a contract with the school and this is how it's gonna go, whereas a public school is more of everyone follows the exact same criteria more or less. Why don't you teach Ty what the difference between the two?
Yeah, well, you were sneaking up on being close there.
Nice.
Yeah, so if you think about Anne Arundel County, we'll use that as an example. Anne Arundel County has hundreds and hundreds of elementary, middle, and high schools, and they all follow the same curriculum. They all essentially are going to feel and look the same when you go in terms of what kids are learning. A charter school is going to be a school that does things vastly different than the other schools in the district. So in Maryland, if you want to start a charter school, you would come to me and you would come with an application of how you want that school to look and feel. We would put a team of people together. We'd review that application, and the Board of Education for Anne Arundel County would determine whether to approve it or not. If it's approved, then you're free to open the school. And then we, as the authorizer of the school, would hold you accountable for the outcomes of what you say you're going to do within that school building. So we provide the funding to you, and in exchange for accountability, we provide you all the autonomy you need to run the school differently than what other schools look like in the school district. And a charter is nothing more than a legally binding agreement between the operator of the school and the school district. And
Got
it's
it.
just, it is what it is. It's a legally binding agreement. It says this is how the school is going to look and feel, and this is what we're going to do um, to make sure kids are learning in our school building. So it's not for the faint of heart. I've been on the other side. I also worked for a charter operator in the state of Maryland, where I was the one going into school districts and opening schools. It's extremely, extremely hard work to go into a huge school district and say you're going to do things differently and be successful at it. So it's hard work, but we've got some great charter schools in Anne Arundel County right now, and um, we're just excited to continue to do that work.
So if I'm a parent, I would find a charter school and they spend more time on STEM, they spend more time on math or how they teach. And then is it the lottery system of how the student gets into a charter school?
You're doing your homework, Matt. I'm impressed. Yes. So charter school is all lottery. There's no, we don't look at kids' grades. We don't look at kids' attendance. We don't see any identifying information. Essentially, you put your name in a hat and we go in and it's a random lottery
Hmm.
draw. And if, let's just say, for example, you can take 100 new students every year and 500 kids apply. We take the first 100 and those kids get a seat, and then the rest are put on a wait list. And then schools all offer something different just depending upon what they've brought to the table. So we have
Got it.
some schools that are STEM schools. We have some schools that are math science schools. We have some schools that are international baccalaureate. We have some project-based learning schools. So yeah, I mean, really, it's just a different method of teaching and a different curriculum that they use.
Do do they are charter schools based on learning differences ever, like, where they were like, "Hey, there's a need for this learning style. Let's get kids with this learning style all together." Is that a thing?
It is a thing, and I know that we don't have any charter schools like that in Anne Arundel County, but I know across the country, schools are started to target students that, could learn differently and maybe benefit from having a school where they can focus on one way of learning.
Okay. So are right now they're kinda geared towards kids who are talented in one area, or is it that they're interested in that area,
They
or
just have to have an interest
okay,
or a talent, but we can't identify that talent prior to enrolling them. So
Got it.
unlike, there are certain schools, you probably heard of magnet schools. Some school districts have magnet schools they have to try out for. So let's just take School for the Arts in Baltimore City. To get into School for the Arts, you have to try out. You have to play an instrument, you have to act, you have to dance. So you try out and you get selected for that school. With a charter school, like I said, all you have to do is put your name in a hat and it's a random lottery. But I would say that if you're going to go to a STEM school, you probably want to have an interest in that prior to putting your name in the hat.
is there any experimental part of a charter school where they're like, "Hey, let's take this school, let's try this different learning style, and then if it's and study it, and if it's successful, then we take that to the rest of the public schools?" Like, does that ever
Absolutely.
happen?
Yeah. I mean,
Uh,
I would say that's really one of the big advantages of allowing a charter school to open in your district is there are things that charter schools can try that traditional public schools can't. And so the notion is you try it, you experiment, not at the detriment of students, but hopefully students will benefit from it. And then we, as a school district, try to take that and maybe implement it and infuse it across all of our schools if it's able to be um, duplicated across schools. Like sometimes things are just, because some public schools are so big, it's hard to duplicate something that you're doing at a school with 150 students. But to your point, yeah, it's we're studying what the charter schools are doing all the time to see if it can be duplicated across schools.
And now how do you recruit the teachers?
Same way, traditional schools recruit teachers. You have to go to job fairs, you put out ads for teachers, you work with the human resource division in the school district to see who's applied, and then you interview and you choose teachers that really are a good fit for your program.
When you were going over your portfolio of what you oversee, did you say contract schools?
Yeah, so a contract school is something that is similar to a charter school, but charter schools by law have to be open to the entire district. So let's say if you opened a charter school in Annapolis, students would come from across the entire district. Contract schools are schools that we open that target certain areas and certain neighborhoods. So, for example, we have a contract school in the Laurel area that only pulls students from that area.
Okay,
And it was designed specifically to reduce overcrowding in that particular area. We have another one right off of West Street in Annapolis that was really open to reduce overcrowding in the Annapolis area.
got it.
So the difference between a charter and a contract is one's open to the entire district. One, we can dictate where the enrollment comes from. One's also governed by a law. So there's a charter school law in Maryland that dictates what a charter school should be. And so charter schools that open in districts have to follow state law, whereas a contract school is really just an agreement between the school district and the school. Um, it's a problem we identified as a district and then went out and
Yeah.
solved it with a school.
So, so growing up, was education always the goal for you?
No, it wasn't. My mother was a teacher, so obviously I had some modeling in my house for somebody who worked in education. I was a business major in college. I graduated and worked in finance for a couple years. Realized that just wasn't my thing. I played college football. I really wanted to get into coaching. I really wanted to just see what else was out there besides the world of finance, and decided to go back and get an advanced degree in school counseling, and went to work in Baltimore County as a high school counselor and coached and just did that for 10 years, and then started to see what else was out there in the world of education. Things were quickly changing on the front with technology and school choice and some other really cool things across the country. And that's when I went to work for a company located in Baltimore that did online virtual schooling across the country. It was a tech startup at the time, and did some work there. And that's where I got introduced to charter schools. And that was right around 2004 when Maryland passed their charter law, and went and worked for the State Department of Education as a director of charter schools for the state for a few years. And met this group that was starting to come into Maryland to open charter schools. And they were kind of recruiting me out of there to help them set up schools across the state. So that's kind of how my work got started with charter schools. But I kind of, I like a lot of people, I think that change careers early on. You graduate and think you want to do one thing, and you're
Right.
young and you kind of shift gears. But it's been a great career.
So
And
I've been following these articles recently, talking specifically about these tech billionaires and such that are leaving California, moving to
Hmm.
Florida for tax reasons,
Yep.
and they can't get their kids into the schools that they want.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
the same thing out in Silicon Valley, same thing. So they're starting their own schools. When
Yeah.
people who go in and start their own schools, are they starting charter schools? Or are they starting literally Ty and Matt's Academy of Education?
I think they're starting time Matt's education. They're so I think that I read that same article. So they're really opening these things called micro schools,
Okay.
which are tiny private schools that are blossoming, particularly in Florida, because to your point, there's a lot of very wealthy folks moving out of some of these states going down to Florida. There's not enough seats in the private schools down there, and so these very wealthy people are starting these little private schools that are beginning to pop up everywhere. So that's sort of the next phase, I think, in school choice are these things called micro schools. Begin to do. I've begun to do some studying because I'm really interested in what that looks like in other states. We haven't really begun to explore that in Maryland yet,
Right.
but I think that's kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah, but they still have to get like accredited.
Hmm.
Obviously. Yeah.
They do, but it's much easier to get accredited as a private school than a public school because, again, as a public
Oh,
school, you're taking federal tax dollars, state
right.
tax dollars. So there's a lot of rules and regulations you got to follow. As a private school, if you're taking private tuition, there's not
Yeah.
as many rules and regulations you need to follow.
Back to the basics. Do they have all the standard things that a regular public school has? Do they have sports teams? Do they have a musical? Do they have a
Hmm.
play? Do they have lunch?
Hmm.
Does little Maddie get to have recess? Do they have
Needs it.
buses? All that stuff?
They do. Maybe not to the scale that, take Severna Park High School has 2,000 students versus a charter school that might have 500. They may not have the same amount of sports teams. They might not have a school band. They may have limited options in terms of course offerings just because of the smaller nature of the school. But I think that going in as a parent and a student, that, if I'm a football star, I'm not going to one of our charter schools. You're going to go. So we have a number of students who are eighth graders in some of our charter schools that are really, really good athletes. And in ninth grade, they go to Spalding or they go to one of the large high schools because that's what they're going to do to get into college. So
Yeah.
I think you just have to balance out what schools offer before you make a choice.
And is there pressure on you or pressure on the teachers where you're like, our kids need to be reading at a certain grade level, our test scores need to be this, their SATs need to be this? Do they have to be better than the public schools? Like, is there that pressure there because of the funding?
There's a lot of pressure. Yeah. There's
Uh,
the pressure that if you say you're going to open a school and this is what you're going to do, you got to do it. So there is extra pressure on a charter school because, again, that's what a charter school is. A charter school can close. So when you open a charter school in Anne Arundel County, you open with a 5-year contract. At the end of that 5 years, we review your performance and make a determination as to whether you should continue to operate. So your data needs to be good, and it needs to be at least as good as the neighboring schools, if not better. So to lead a charter school and to operate a charter school, you're continuously operating under a lot of pressure for results.
Matt,
Yes, Ty.
do you have any more charter school questions, or can we pivot to football?
I know you've been dying, so you've been really good about letting the grown-ups talk.
Okay. So, Pat, you mentioned that you were a college football player and that you coach football,
That's right.
correct? Okay.
Correct.
So where did you what was your upbringing with football?
So I grew up in South Florida. I grew up in Miami, and anyone who knows anything about football knows that South Florida is a hotbed for little league and high school football. So I did grow up in an area that really almost like, a Texas or a California or Western Pennsylvania when it comes to football. So I started playing football as, I think I was like 6 or 7 years old when I started playing. I also had a dad who played briefly in the NFL. And so, he sort of pushed me towards starting to play football when I was really young. And he was my coach. And yeah, I mean, it was a very competitive environment to grow up in, particularly in the area where I grew up. So, I learned very young that there's a lot of competition out there, particularly at the high school level. And so my first high school that I went to was a large 5A high school in Miami with about 6,000 students.
Oh,
And I remember going out for football the first day, and there was 150 kids out for football, um, half of which were probably going to go Division One. And so I stayed there for a year, and then I transferred to a smaller private school for my junior and senior year, which was a little bit less competitive,
Uh,
which was a great decision for me to make because I probably would not have played very much if I had stayed at that large public school.
and then you ended up in a school in Central Maryland that curiously was called Western Maryland, which is kinda weird because it's not actually in Western Maryland. Is that correct?
That's correct. The Western Maryland Railroad used to run through it, which is how it's got its name.
Okay.
But everybody asks me what it was like to go to college in Frostburg, and I say I didn't go to college in Frostburg. I went to college in Carroll County, which is 45 minutes outside Baltimore. The Western Maryland College.
So Pat, we're gonna relate our wellness to football. So, since you signed a HIPAA waiver, you have at least 2 joints that are pretty beat up directly from football injuries, right? So everybody looks at you playing sports, walking around, working out, being a healthy person. And the first thing is, I don't think they look at you and say, oh, he's got a beat up body part. They're like, oh, I wish I was fit like that guy. So, first of all, how do you approach working out, working around your old football injuries? That's my first question. My second
Hmm.
question is football got a little bit of a negative press in the last 10 years
Hmm.
as far as injuries and things like that. How do you
Yeah.
look back on your time playing football, regrets versus all the things that it added to your life?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think about that quite often when I'm trying to do something and I can barely lift my arm over my head because I've dislocated my shoulder so many times, or I'm trying to do something and my wrist just won't move the way it's supposed to. But I don't have any regrets. I would go back and do it all over again in a heartbeat. The camaraderie that you get from being on a team with the guys in the locker room and just the stories that we get together and tell now, 30 years later, there's nothing that can replace that. I have some aches and pains, but there's nothing that's really
Worth it.
keeping me from doing anything. Um, it's painful at times and it's frustrating, but you work through it. I mean, I've been dealing with it for close to 30 years. So I just kind of have learned to work around it, Ty, to your question about how I work out and how I deal with it. I have just learned what I do that aggravates it and just try to stay away from that when I can. But a lot of it's just grinding through. Like that's just kind of how I've operated for the last 30 years is I got to go exercise. I got to go work out. I'm just going to kind of deal with the discomfort that exists. I wish my orthopedic could do more to help me, but just
Or one eight
it's
hundred
not
Klepper.
there yet.
Brian Klepper if you want. That's the guy you want. But let's really get serious here, Pat. Let's combine football and golf, two of your passions. What's your highlight of football on the golf course?
My highlight of football on the golf course. I don't even know
Yeah.
what that question means, Matt. I'm
Yeah.
struggling here. Give me a
Adult
little
camp,
more. Give me a little
adult
more. Am I
camp
like
day.
supposed to
Adult
tackle
camp
somebody on
day.
the
Come
golf
on.
course?
Adult camp
Adult
day.
camp
Did
day.
he make a winning catch?
No, he was quarterback. He caught a streaking Mookie Waldron going down the left side, button hooked over. A beautiful over the shoulder pass from Pat Crain, probably into the wind. It was 80 yards. 80
I
yards.
I'll take it. Sounds great.
Yep.
That was my
Well,
highlight.
that hurt,
Thank you for
Pat. That
remembering
that
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 for
was right
me.
here in my journal, and I have a picture of that day, and
That's
I've always
funny.
looked up to that, but you don't remember. So you've just crushed my dreams.
So, Pat, as we're getting back into the serious football here, with the concern with head injuries and knee injuries and shoulder injuries and everything with football, I always step back and be like, the one thing I think sometimes parents don't realize is that most people are done playing football when they're 17 years old. Like, so when they watch an NFL game, that's not how your typical high school game is. And then people like you were done when you're 22 years old. So if you're still playing when you're 36, you are the elite of the elite of the elite. And that's when more injuries are going to happen. And I think that's one thing that parents need to think about, and that there's risk with every sport, but some of the benefits of football can stay with you for the rest of your life. And you don't have to be a Peyton Manning superstar. Just being a backup on a high school team and being in practice every day, and the discipline to show up to summer practice and do the workouts and sometimes get hit by somebody who's bigger than you can those are lessons that can go on the rest of your life.
Oh, no doubt. I tell people all the time, there's no amount of hard work that phases me compared to being out in 105-degree heat on a summer morning in August in Florida, you know, sweating and stinky pads and dirt all over you. And then having to come back and do it a second time in the afternoon. In
Pat,
even
Ty,
hotter
I
heat.
don't want to, I don't want to rub it in, but Ty and I, we're both maintenance men. Okay, I mean, so simmer down there
Well,
with it.
compared to picking up the trash in Sherwood summers. But to your point, Ty, yeah, all those things you mentioned are you can't replace that with anything. Now there are other sports where you can learn those things, but I don't know that there's any sport where you're just on every play getting hit and potentially knocked down and having to pick yourself back up. But I'll say, neither one of my boys played high school football. Um, in my younger son Zach, who played college lacrosse, tore his ACL playing college lacrosse.
Yeah.
I came out of football, my knees unscathed, so it can happen playing anything, and it was a
Right.
non-contact injury. So it's you don't know. Um, but I think football inherently probably presents higher risk than a lot of other sports just because of the nature of the game.
Sure.
But again, what it provided to me, I have no regrets. I would go do it again.
Well, and the other thing with football is the different positions have a lot of different body types, and some of those line positions, you're not gonna be on the soccer team with that type of body. You might be a heavyweight wrestler, maybe lose some weight and be a power forward on the basketball team, but there's certain body types where your best chance to be a part of the team, learn about teamwork, become coachable, do all those things is football. If you're not playing football, you might be inactive for certain body types.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you're a big dude and you're trying to play a sport, probably playing line is going to be your only option
Yeah.
for many really big kids. And which line I would say is probably the safest position in football.
Hmm.
Now, you mentioned your dad was your coach and you coached your kids. What are your thoughts on dad coaches?
It's a terrible idea.
Uh-huh.
Terrible idea.
It's
Uh,
it's done all the time, so we gotta dive into
it is
this.
done all the time. Let's dive in. This is you know, this caused a lot of tension in my household uh, as a dad coach because I think you're always harder on your own kids naturally when you coach them. If I had to do all over again, I probably would not have coached them. I would have let someone else coach them, and I would have just been a spectator and enjoyed stepping back and allowing them to enjoy the game and have fun. Because here's the thing: if your kids are going to go on to play high school sports, you're not coaching them in high school. It's only very rare occasions where your dad is your high school coach, and at some point, they've got to stand on their own merits and they've got to make a team, based on their performance. And so, sometimes parents, lean in certain directions when they think about playing time and they think about positions. And I just think I think parent coaches inevitably are just they're gonna default to favoring their kids in certain situations, and I don't think it helps the child to do that. So I don't think dad coaches should exist. I think they should just hire neutral folks who have no connection to coach and teach the sport when these kids are young.
So I do think there's times where, and my kids have been on teams. I did coach my kids just like you did also, but
Hmm.
kids were on teams where the dad coach or the mom coach was outstanding. And sometimes I think that first of all, they weren't just thrown in there; they had a ton of coaching experience, and it
Hmm.
certainly takes pressure off if your kid is clearly the best at their position. So,
Yep.
like, I coach with a guy who's an incredible dad coach. His son was the
Hmm.
goalie. His son was the best
Hmm.
goalie on the team. There there wasn't an issue. The team usually only had one goalie, so not a problem when the dad's the goalie. Or
Hmm.
if another dad that I coached with, whose son was clearly a leader of the team, loved the sport, first to come, last to leave, loved it, was gonna work hard, and that
Mhm.
made it very easy. So I was never in a situation where the dad was, like, playing a kid who should have been a backup.
Mhm.
And then I think the lower levels where it's more just about having fun, as long as the mom or dad is fun, then it's okay, and they're still teaching the game. But I have seen it the wrong way where I've seen dads, you know, turn the offense around a person who might be the 5th best offensive player on the team, or a parent who started a kid who you're like, "Oh, that kid's, only starting because of his mom or his dad." And I've seen it both.
Yeah.
I call it dad,
No,
but I've seen
yeah.
moms do it also.
So I think for me personally, and I'm only speaking from personal experience, I think just the nature of me being an extremely competitive person, um, I didn't always make it fun for my kids.
Okay.
I tended to sometimes bring it home, or bring it on the car ride home, and I think sometimes, it might have taken its toll on the stress level in the house. So, it also depends on the person too.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then to be fair, I probably was only qualified to coach one of the, many sports I coached. I coached soccer when the kids were little. I played soccer when I was a kid, but I didn't know a lot about it. I coached basketball. I played high school basketball, but I didn't know anything about X's and O's. I know how to play. Football was the only thing. And then I helped lacrosse a couple of years. I never picked up a lacrosse stick in my life. So I think if you're going to be a parent coach, at least know the sport that you're coaching
Right.
and have some credible experience behind you, because there were times when our kids did play on teams where I didn't coach, and I don't know that they got great coaching just because I don't know that the dads really had the experience necessary to be great coaches. They were great guys, but they weren't. I don't know how much they were learning about the sport.
It's fair.
Yeah. I did have, one thing where I coached my I both coached both my daughters in lacrosse from their, 5 years old till 12 years old, and, my younger daughter, Mary Kate, as soon as I stopped coaching her, she stopped playing because she only wanted to play on the team that I was coaching, and then she was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
you're not coaching anymore, I'm done," and she started doing other stuff, and then she was at a lower conference level in high school, and her senior year, her friends were like, "Oh, you should play lacrosse with us." And so she started and had a great senior year. She wasn't the star, but she started every game, had a ton of
Hmm.
fun.
Yeah.
And so at the time I was like, "Oh, I spent all that time coaching her. She really didn't play afterwards. Maybe I should have coached one of the other kids those years." But we had a great time with me coaching her in a rec league environment. And then she learned enough that her senior year, after not holding a stick for 3 years, she picked it up and was able to contribute and have fun. So it was like what I thought was maybe not the best situation for me coaching ended up being like super fun. And I was
Yeah.
kind of proud of the fact that I put those years in. And
No,
then
that's a
Because
great
my
so
story.
basically, let me just sum all that up for you. Mary Kate, the only reason she started her senior year is because of the coaching that she
Because
had. Is
of
that what
Coach
I got?
Todd.
no,
That's
I
what I
meant,
got.
but she
Okay,
wouldn't
all right.
have
That's a hard
played
stop.
if I
Hard stop.
wasn't
And
her
then
coach.
everything else
And
you say
that,
after that, blah
like,
blah blah blah.
yes. Now the other story I had was one time when my 4th kid, Roddy, was signed up for little kid basketball. He's like 8, and I'm sitting there at the first practice, and the coach, this is his first 8-year-old. So this guy has played basketball. He's, done all these basketball things, but he's never coached 8-year-olds before. And
Hmm.
his first practice was insane. And I just came up to him. I said, "Listen, I have never done an organized basketball league. I've never been coached in basketball. I've never been on a team. But I can coach 8-year-olds." And so I did the corralling the kids. He did all the basketball coaching, and it worked perfectly. That's the only year, or I've coached basketball 2 years, but both times it was me just being the organizer, corraller, putting an arm around the kid, and the X's and O's was left to the actual person with basketball knowledge.
So
So
now
I do
you're
think there's
Steve Kerr.
roles.
Now you're the Steve Kerr of basketball. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Good God, Pat, this has really been fascinating learning more about Pat.
Well,
Jeez.
what I was trying to say is there are times where I think parents and honestly, if parents didn't coach, would you even have enough coaches to coach? Like, how are you going to
Right.
pay
So
people to
Hey,
coach
it's
a
a problem.
listen,
Yeah,
leave the
no,
personal anecdotes out of it and just sum it up with that 2 sentence right there and let Pat talk.
it's a
I mean, we've
problem
talked about this
with
in our podcasting classes, in
obviously.
our podcast charter school that we started.
We should start one. Obviously, there are numbers issues with coaches. To your point, you probably wouldn't find, but what if you just mixed it up? What if you, as a dad, didn't have to coach your child? What if you just flip flopped? Matt coached your kid's team, you coached Matt's kid's team. Still have the same number of coaches, you're just not coaching your kid's team. The other thing I'll say is inevitably you're going to be friends with some of the parents of the kids
Sure.
on your team. So are parents strong enough not to overplay one child because they're best friends with so and so? Because I don't know how you guys chose teams, but I know when my kids were little and we went to the basketball draft, I got all the kids who my kids were friends with. Like, hey, Dad, you got to get this kid and this kid and this kid and this kid, and it was great. But that fifth and sixth kid who we drafted at the end, who we didn't know, then those two poor kids were on the team with all these, other kids who were friends and went to school together. And, a funny story, I'm coaching lacrosse. This was when the kids were like 12, and I'm on the sidelines, and my job was just to run kids in and out of the box. And I feel my phone vibrating. I look down and it's a parent saying, hey, my kid hasn't been in the last 5 minutes. Can you please put him in?
Wow.
Now, I'm not mentioning any names, but
Peter
it might be
Smith.
somebody
Peter
we
Smith.
know.
Peter Smith.
It's actually one of our favorite stories to laugh about to this day.
Wow. I didn't know Peter knew how to text back then, but that's amazing. That is amazing.
Well, do you miss coaching at all?
Yes and no. I would actually like to go back and coach now, not under the stress of winning and losing, but just enjoying being out there with the kids and teaching the game. I've often thought about going back and coaching now that my kids are grown, and I would be a coach of kids I didn't know.
But what age and football coach, head coach, line coach? What would you? I mean, dream?
No, I don't think I want to do high school. I think I would probably do, like the little guys, 10, 12 years old, something like that, just to go out and have fun with them. I don't even know if I want to be the head coach. I don't want all the responsibility
Right.
that comes with that. I just, I want to go out and maybe help the head coach, support them, and just, help kids learn the sport. I don't know if I'll ever do it or not, but it's from time to time, I often think about, now that my kids are grown and out of the house, what am I doing with my extra time? Could go out and do
I
some
think
coaching.
in your job right now, though, as you said, you work with a lot of principals, so you still are coaching
I'm
in just
coaching.
in a
You're
different
right.
way.
Absolutely. Yep.
Well,
You're right.
the interesting thing is shuffling it up and coaching like the team that your kid's not on, and that's why you're in charter schools, because you think outside the box. Matt would have never thought of that.
Never.
Nope. Is
That's all.
now do you feel like, so like when your dad was coaching you and you mentioned that he played in the NFL, does
Mhm.
that, when you play at the highest level, does that make you more laid back to coach, where you're kind of like, hey, this is about, like, he could look and be like, this is about fun because none of these kids are making the NFL? Or does that make you more intense? Or do you think that goes person to person? Like you
I think
coach
it's
with a lot of
person to
people.
I think it's person to person. My dad was not laid back at all about it. But I do watch those really good feel good 30 for 30s or some of these documentaries where the dad played in the NFL and now the son just got drafted and the dad says, "Oh, I never forced him into anything. He just, was around me all the time and sort of gravitated to the sport, and I was there if he needed me, but I wasn't overbearing about it." So, I think it can work both ways. I'm sure there are dads that have played professionally that are overbearing and wanting the worst way for their kid to become a professional athlete. But I think there's some that just let it kind of organically happen, and I think that's the way it really should happen.
Ty, have you heard what's his name, Greg Olson, talk about it? Greg Olson, who played for the Carolina Panthers, is now in the booth.
Yeah.
He and Chad Pennington might be coaches like in Charlotte of like their kids like 10-year-old team,
Uh-huh.
and he's talking and he's like, "Oh no, this is not fun. We're there to win." And he is like it sounds like Vince Lombardi.
Yeah, no,
And
it makes
again,
sense.
but again, it's the person and the team and the kids. So I guess it really depends. It's a little, you can't generalize that personal statement, but um,
Well,
but Pat, I do think you have a lot to give out there, and it'd be cool to see you throw on the old bike shorts and get out there.
Matt,
I've never, for the record, ever owned a pair of bike shorts, Matt. Thankfully, by the time I got into coaching, they were out of vogue,
Okay,
out
all
of
right,
style.
now how do
Well,
you
my high
think
school coach had them.
well, definitely
how do you think it was different when say your dad was playing youth football versus you were playing youth football versus Pat and Zach were playing youth football versus this future team that you and Matt are going to coach, and you're the offensive coordinator, Matt's the defensive coordinator, yelling at Matt, you
Oh
need to
my God, I
stop
can't
him.
wait.
I
Matt's
don't even know that
yelling,
I
not
don't
one
even know
more
that
inch.
I don't even know that my dad had youth football. Honestly, he probably didn't even play football till high school.
Uh-huh.
I don't even know. He was a really big, like he was probably wouldn't even be able to play youth football. He was just one of those really big early bloomers who was, and nowadays probably would have been too big to make
Right,
weight. So I don't even know that there was youth football for him. I think now it's probably become more specialized, like every sport. I almost feel like a lot of these kids have to choose a sport at an early age, and
yeah,
then they play one, and then they work with a trainer the rest of the year. It's not like when we all grew up and we played a sport every season just because we loved playing, and it wasn't. We didn't have all the club teams that they have now, so you always had a team you could play on. But I feel like for a lot of kids now, at a age 12, they may not even be able to make a team anymore. And so I think things have changed dramatically. And now, you've got the private equity getting into the youth sports and they're kind of
right.
taking over. So, a lot of parents are getting priced out when their kids are fairly young. So it's definitely moving in some strange directions. Just curious to see. I'd like to see it kind of go back to that non-specialized where kids
Yeah.
just, played 3 sports because they could.
How does the private equity thing work? I saw the title of an article and I didn't read the article. Why is private equity getting into youth sports?
There's a lot of money to be made.
Uh-huh.
Think about
And
all the tournaments, and
yeah,
there's tons of money to be made in the facilities and tournaments and leagues and elite teams and travel teams. There's tons of money to be made.
yeah, yeah,
And
you're right.
that's just going to lock kids who are talented out, or I guess they'll have scholarships for those kids or something.
Or the kids will get burned out because they have to, step up to do this. So yeah, but that's a different podcast for a different day.
Different podcast for a different day. But it was an interesting video that I watched. This was a couple weeks ago. I just kind of saw it come across my feed and watched it, and I had heard that private equity was getting into the youth sport market, but that's the first I had really seen like kind of what the numbers are looking like and what the result of parents having to pay several $1,000s for a season, and if you'd have multiple kids and they play multiple sports, it gets expensive.
Well,
Well,
Well, good old LTRC probably doesn't really exist anymore in the way we knew it.
but
I was a
Pat, you're a problem
Towson
solver.
guy
You'll
and
figure
Matt
it
was a
out.
Roland Park Little League guy.
Oh, Roller Park Little League. That's
Yeah.
for everybody. That's
Yeah.
everyone plays Little
But
I
I'll
was
tell
a
you what,
Ruston
when I drive by
Rhinos.
now, the girls get upset at me because I like in the cars when the windows will be rolled up. I'm like, look at those punks. They wear the pants. We never had pants. We never had baseball pants.
You had your
They were
cut-off
all
jean
wearing
shorts?
tubskins.
Yeah. Now, Matt, what Little League sports did you play?
All of them.
All of them?
Yeah.
Soccer,
Well, soccer, lacrosse, yeah, basketball. Yep.
basketball?
Yep.
And you just decided to
Baseball.
stick with golf.
And decided to stick with golf.
Okay.
And here we are.
Well, did you learn
Yeah.
anything about coaching where you could reclaim your role as my golf coach? Did you learn anything? Were you paying attention?
No. No, I'm done with you. I mean, you're. I've taken you to the range. And even your daughters were like, "Oh, that was so nice of you." Remember that when you like you had a play date with my dad. That was so nice of you. And yeah, and if Pat wants to take on that burden, I mean, I hand it off to you easily. Enjoy watching the big bird over there hunch over the ball, so he's like shorter than my mom. It's fun. It's good.
Ty has gotten the more patient Pat Crain coaching style.
Ooh.
So I'm a I'm a horrible golfer, but I feel like I can watch somebody's golf swing and give them pointers. I can't personally recreate that golf swing myself, but I can tell what you're doing wrong.
Yeah.
It's your
And I
feet,
think
Ty. You
that's the sign
you
of a
gotta
good coach. That's
can't
the
move your
sign of a good
feet
coach.
after your swing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Keep your
Okay.
feet still.
Keep
That's
my
the
head
key.
down, feet, don't grip the club too tight. Okay.
There you go.
Yep.
So maybe we should turn to Pat for some mentoring on our podcasting abilities.
I love it.
Oh,
I love
now
it.
I'm gonna
Or
get in
maybe we should
trouble.
maybe we should
Already
go
getting in
play
trouble
golf.
because I already offered that job to Franco.
Too
So
bad.
it's getting late. We should probably sign off
Too
before we
late.
get in more trouble.
Oh,
Well,
well,
I will
need
say
that.
this, guys. I'm impressed by your research and your knowledge of charter schools. What little it was, you all seem to have the basic concept, and I feel like you did your homework. You knew about some of the funding issues associated with it. You know the basic kind of rules around what charter schools were. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, no. We're all about the basics and let you
Yeah,
do the heavy
no,
lifting.
guys are
Yep.
doing your research before.
Yeah, well, it's our staff, but it's all good. But Pat, this is great. Always good to know what's going on out there, and we'll definitely have you back when we figure out about contract schools and when we start our podcast school.
I appreciate it, guys. Loved it.
Thanks, buddy.
Yep.